what it means or how it affects different people for different reasons, that those conversations don't really ever happen, so they just separate people. So we won't talk about it, and then we'll talk about it with our people, and they'll talk about it with their people. And that's just like a very tactile way that I experience that separation in a really simple way.
Great, so you're saying that the kind of idea of post-racial America is a way that we all get to be colorblind and ignore race,
right.
And say that we don't deal with racism anymore, so when people try to say they're experiencing it, other people say, no,
well, that already happens.
So I'll take Stack now since we're having a conversation, so just get my attention. The person in the blue shirt, you in the blue pants and that.
Well, I was just going to mention, we did have kind of a little bit of a break off here where we sort of had indigenous people and immigrants actually break off and form sort of their own group. And we were able to heal that, I think, pretty well. We do now have an immigration and indigenous people committee that I believe has formed from that. On Wednesday night, I think we kind of had where they sent representatives to meet with us for that GA. And where we now, I believe, are actually working together and have guaranteed them where we will have a representative at every meeting to hear their issues. Because that is something, to my understanding, they felt left out on by a number of people in the group blocking proposals and saying that's not something we wanted to involve the 99% in, was my understanding. So I'd like to think that's something where we've actually had a problem here, right here, and we've actually worked it out to what seems to me to be the mutual satisfaction of all the people here in consensus forum, which is a great thing to see, because I don't know in government or in any other situation where you'd actually see people talk about that and reach consensus.
I was just going to ask you, I mean, is it my turn? I was just going to ask you, how do you define the elite? I mean, is that what Occupy, the 99% is?
Excuse me, define what?
The elite.
The elite.
How are you defining the elite? Is the 99% against, I mean, I was just wondering.
The 1%.
Well, how are you defining the 1%? Is it, certain people that are eradicating certain lineages and then certain people that are impostering them? Maybe it should be certain, the 1% needs to be defined and verified. I don't think, people don't seem to know the history of certain issues, unfortunately.
I'm more just using kind of the rhetoric of the Occupy movement to talk about, it's not always been 1%, the elite has looked really different throughout the United States.
Well, how are you defining the elite?
Let me say,
I guess I'm just a little bit
let's keep going through the
discombobulated.
stack. Is that okay? Yeah. And if somebody wants to respond to that through their turn, does that work? Leah?
Whoa. Silent invisible Holocaust.
So an example that I think of that's current is thinking about, for example, the healthcare, like a movement, a potential popular movement for healthcare for all, and how the right wing has used the racism that exists in society to say that a huge percentage of people that would benefit from it are like these people who aren't working, and using coded language for saying people of color, and particularly undocumented immigrants. And so it's been one more way that instead of all people who need healthcare, which is like the vast majority of people in this country who need some access to healthcare, being able to unite, there become big divisions along race, and so then here we are without healthcare for many people. So that's just one example.
Yeah, another example, are all the races, anti-immigrant laws that have passed in the state. Definitely, I feel that a lot of people have joined, more conservative groups because of, immigration issues, and so there's a lot of separation among these groups that, do you want to support, these issues like illegal immigration or whatever, all kinds of issues, but also, so I've seen racism and separation through laws here in our state, especially with ethnic studies happening, and also with Proposition 300 that targeted undocumented students so that they wouldn't get financial aid or any form of help so that they could go to school. And so I see a clear separation of certain people not wanting certain people to be educated, and and dividing, right? And dividing people that support education within the educational system. There's a lot of folks that support education, oh, but I won't support undocumented, illegal students that are here. They shouldn't even be here. So even people within the educational system that are call themselves educators still went and like joined conservative groups and didn't want to support. And they actually, some professors and people from the universities were talking to certain people in the legislature and complaining that we had immigrants and illegal aliens in our schools and that we shouldn't give them resources. And these are educators, and when you think educators, you think, oh, color blindness, like you think that, these folks are not going to discriminate against anyone, but even people within that sector were divided. Right? I saw it there. Big time.
I have something to add. And I've seen, in growing up in South Phoenix, that there's a lot of potential for improvement for that community. And there's a lot of potential for people to organize, but what I've seen is that there's a lot of internal conflict in that community based on race between the Hispanic population and the African American population. That simple division of race has caused that community to stay stagnant when it could improve itself, and a lot of that has to do with outside influence. It's not always from within. There are people who feel a certain way towards another race within the community, but a lot of times there's police influence. There's policy influence that influences the African Americans to not like the Hispanics and vice versa. So this is an issue within communities like South Phoenix and Maryville that we need to overcome. And it doesn't affect this movement as we stand right now, but it will, because we will have these people represented in this movement, and they will show. Today they're not here in mass, but they will be here. Expect us.
Yes, I think that the state suppressing people's education is huge. I know that I personally at ASU and other county schools, Maricopa, ASU, Maricopa County Community College, is not able to access, say, the Washington Post or the Boston Globe or the London Times, and just in various, the bookstores closing, and just it seems that, when certain areas suppress the public's education, that is not a very good sign. And I know that I myself am a little bit, of a hostage of Arizona. Well, not able to receive mail. The phone, I don't know how many of you have tried, making calls from payphone, but from my experience, I can't even call the police or fire department on the East Coast due to the phone being intercepted and rerouted or disconnected within a second or a second and a half, or in